Islami Chhatra Shibir, they came onto the street and the violence just went through the roof. The students were there, but they were not, it has been overtaken by other forces. The students were not the prime drivers of the violence, the prime drivers of the clashes anymore.
There is a feeling that, the Bangladeshis don't remember 1971. Jamaat-e-Islami has influence inside the Bangladesh army?
Oh yes. When they came back from Fort Williams and they met me, they had tears in their eyes. They said, we know now that India has not forgotten 1971. Even the Hindus and minorities are being asked to step down from any post they may have.
Why won't America extradite the killers of Bangabandhu? Why won't they do it?
For people to say that India is pro-Sheikh Hasina or, anti-somebody else is not correct, because we are dealing with the Prime Minister who has been elected in Bangladesh.
Absolutely. Anybody who follows social media, even mainstream media, there is a very strong anti-India feeling in Bangladesh. I'm talking about the street, man.
In fact, I remember in my time they used to say that, every aircraft that comes from Pakistan to Bangladesh has about 8 or 10 people who step in without any papers.
You can't send back a former head of state because that calls into question your credibility. Tomorrow, anybody who comes to India, India will hand over, that means. Hello friends, welcome again back to Gap, the Gaurav Arya podcast. You've been asking me about Bangladesh. And we said, who is the person who can speak about Bangladesh? Now we have with us Ms. Veena Sikri, former High Commissioner to Bangladesh, and she's known as the authority on all things in Bangladesh. Ma'am, a very warm welcome, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to your podcast.
And ma'am, a deep honor and privilege for us to have you at our studios, ma'am. My first question, ma'am, is why did this happen? Whatever happened? Why did it happen, ma'am? All of a sudden, suddenly we find that, of course, there were protests going on for quite a while, but suddenly we find mobs at the Prime Minister's door. Can you give us a brief background?
Well, I think, let me put one sentence right in the beginning. This has been a military coup, a regime change operation that has, caused Sheikh Hasina to leave her post, resign from her post and leave the country. I say this because, yes, the students' protests were there. Let me give a little background to the students' protests. Now, Sheikh Hasina has been Prime Minister for the last 15 years. And during this time, the Awami League has always been pro-student. In 1971, when the Liberation War started, in fact, on 25th March 1971, when Yahya Khan was in Dhaka having talks with Sheikh Mujib, after the elections in which Sheikh Mujib's party, Awami League, had got the largest number of seats, and he should have become Prime Minister of Pakistan. But, Bhutto did not want that, and so there were talks to see how to work it out. The talks failed. Ayub Khan surreptitiously left Dhaka, but he gave the green signal to the Pakistan army to launch Operation Searchlight, which was a genocidal operation against the people of Bangladesh, which continued for the next 9 months. And the target of this Operation Searchlight was twofold. First, arrest Sheikh Mujib and send him to West Pakistan. Second, go to Dhaka University and start killing the students. So this was, a very much, they had played such a big role in supporting the liberation of Bangladesh, in talking about it, getting opinion in its favor. So they've always been a very dynamic group in Bangladesh. And so the Awami League has always been in very close touch with them. But in 2018, when, and because of that close touch, in the Sheikh Mujib government, there was reservation kept in public jobs and in government jobs and public sector undertakings for the students. 30%, and then later on this went up to 56%, including other categories. But in 2018, when Sheikh Hasina was Prime Minister, there was a movement by the students against the reservation. And, at the time, in 2018, jobs, all other factors came into play. And actually, Sheikh Hasina accepted their demands. So she abolished the reservation. I gave the background to show that how Awami League was committed to reservations for the students, but when there were demonstrations in 2018, she abolished the whole system. And from 2018 right till 2024, there have been no reservations at all for students. And in 2000...
Excuse me, ma'am, but why is nobody talking about this?
Well, the background is very important. That's why I'm going into it a little bit more in detail, because just to show that what really was the students' position and who were they, how did it happen. So between 2018 and 2024, no reservations at all. In June of this year, suddenly somebody made an appeal in the High Court saying that why have the reservations been abolished? We want to restore it. Now, this is a little curious why this happened. And the judge suddenly restored the reservations. Then, you say the judiciary is very pliant, the judiciary is pro-Sheikh Hasina, but that same High Court judge, he actually went against the Sheikh Hasina government and restored the reservation. At that point in June of this year, then the students again started the demonstration. And they were on the street, but totally peaceful. I remember the visuals last 2 months where, the students are standing there demonstrating, we don't want reservations, and the policeman is there, but very peaceful, completely non-violent. This continued till about the middle of July. In the meanwhile, Sheikh Hasina's government actually went in appeal to the Supreme Court against their own High Court decision, saying, we have abolished reservations in 2018, we want to go back to that situation. Now, in the appeal to the Supreme Court, some of the student groups actually joined the Sheikh Hasina's Attorney General in appealing. So I'm trying to show that the students, some of them were actually a lot of them were on the same page as the Sheikh Hasina government. And the students' movement in Bangladesh has never been a kind of hierarchical, unified structure. It's a broad-based structure. There are different groups from different universities. In one university, there may be more than one group. They all have coordinators. And these coordinators then work among themselves and decide what to do. So, some of the students coordinated, they were with the Sheikh Hasina government, and the appeal was filed in the Supreme Court, and the date at that time was given as 7th of August for the Supreme Court hearing. And the peaceful demonstrations continued. The students were there. The police was there. Sheikh Hasina did 2 very important bilateral visits. She left the country to show how peaceful the situation was. She came to India in the 3rd week of June. She went to China in the 2nd week of July. Till 15 July, there was absolutely no violence. Now, at that point, on the 14th of July, she does a press conference whenever she comes back from a foreign visit. And she was doing one on her China visit. Somebody asked her about the students' demonstrations and so on. And she said, yes, we are talking to them. We have gone to the Supreme Court. There will be a hearing in the Supreme Court. And then people asked her, then why was there all this reservation by Awami League? She said, no, the students and the children of freedom fighters, they're an important group. They gave their lives. Their fathers and grandfathers gave their lives for the nation. And of course, we will give reservations to students of freedom fighters, not to students of Razakars, not to children of Razakars. Now, this use of the word Razakar was deliberately misunderstood by some groups of students. And from that evening, and 15th of July, the next morning, violence started. And students, even some of the students were armed. Where did they get the arms from? They were armed. When that happened, the Chhatra League, which is the students' wing of the Awami League, they came onto the streets, and there were clashes between the students and the Chhatra League. Now, in those clashes, some people died. There were some police firings also. On 17th of July, Sheikh Hasina goes on television, makes an appeal to the nation, saying, I have ordered a judicial inquiry into the students' death. Please be calm, because the Supreme Court hearing has been advanced to 21st of July. So please wait till the Supreme Court comes.
From 7th of August to 21st of July?
Yes, it was preponed to 21st of July. And she told everybody that, yes, there's going to be a Supreme Court hearing on 21st July and so on. So please, I request for calm, and I will do a judicial inquiry on the students. At that point, but that point, what had happened, that because Chhatra League had come onto the streets, the student wing of the other political parties, notably the Jamaat-e-Islami, their student wing is called the Islami Chhatra Shibir, they came onto the street, and the violence just went through the roof. There was total violence. The BNP's Chhatra student wing, Jatubadi Jal, they also came onto the street. So there was completely a violence driven by the clash between the Islami Chhatra Shibir and the Chhatra League and the other parties. And this is what got out of control, because after this, it was the Islami Chhatra Shibir which was controlling all students' demonstration. They were controlling the violence. And the violence really spread despite... the army was called in, there were shoot-at-sight orders, and it really became huge, went out of control. On 21st July, when the Supreme Court decision came, that in fact was, absolutely what the students wanted. So the Supreme Court said we are going to reduce the freedom fighters quota to 5% and 2% more for other categories. So 7% is all the reservation, rest will be completely on merit. Now this is actually what the students had wanted, because they had never really asked for abolition of quota. Theirs was a quota reform movement. So they wanted reform of the quota, and they got this reform on 21st of July. In fact, after that, some of the students groups, I told you there are so many of them, they actually put a moratorium on their protests. As I said, we're not going to protest anymore, but we have a list of demands for Sheikh Hasina's government. We're going to talk to her about it. And the demand was she should apologize to the nation. There must be a full inquiry. There must be compensations. And there should be no students' political wings on campuses. So they wanted completely apolitical, all that. There was a whole list of demands, and they were going to talk to them about it. But, the violence just continued, because by now it was in the hands of the Islami Chhatra Shibir, and there was a huge amount. And in fact, even the newspapers in Bangladesh, I remember one of the Daily Star, for example, they did a study on how did this violence happen, who were the people, how many people died, and they came up with a figure before the final round of violence that about 204 people had died. This is what they published in their paper. Maybe after that there had been some addition, but at that time, which was I think after the Supreme Court verdict, 204 people had died. Of them, 53 are students. And the rest are, policemen, bystanders, political party figures, the Islami Chhatra Shibir, Chhatra League, all that. So all this was showing that actually the students were there, but they were not, it had been overtaken by other forces. The students were not the prime drivers of the violence, the prime drivers of the clashes anymore. And I think that if you look at the facts, the way it happened, the army came out, they were violent, a lot of upset people were upset with the violence. At that point, we come up to now, the violence going beyond the end of July and into early August. And at that point, we have a situation where the army chief, also appointed by Sheikh Hasina, but he was responding to his own people. There is a group in the army which is very pro-Jamaat-e-Islami. I think this group is the one which has really got the supreme upper hand. And they said that we will not fire on anybody and Sheikh Hasina must go. So now they transformed the demands, this group which was there and the students wing supporting this group said, now we want 1 point program, Sheikh Hasina must resign. So the army chief, I think, was forced to accept this demand, and he asked Sheikh Hasina to resign and leave the country, which is what she did. And I think that one can see that on 5th August, when she left the country, the violence erupted even more all across the country, targeting the minority communities, the Hindus and the other religious minorities, targeting any evidence related to the liberation war. So the first targets were the statues of Sheikh Mujib. They were just, and I know the students, they're not anti-Sheikh Mujib. They are very patriotic. They believe in the liberation war. They, cherish the memories of the liberation war. On the language day in February, they always go in great numbers to pay tribute to those who fought for the Bengali language and, ultimately got the thing. And so, but the attack immediately after 5th of August was on everything to do with the liberation war. Sheikh Mujib's home, the place where he was assassinated, that was burnt to the ground. And you could see that the students who were taking part, the people who were taking part, were not necessarily university students. You could see them, they were from the madrasas, the Islami Chhatra Shibir students and so on. So this is what has actually been the force behind what happened.
Absolutely, ma'am. But, in India, there is this thinking or narrative in a lot of political, non-political academic circles that what actually happened was there was this homogeneous students movement which was extremely pure, and she was a dictator, which I'm not going to comment whether she was or not, but this entire thing, that there was one bunch of students who said we need to fight for our freedom, they fought and the dictator was ousted. Now what you're saying is that it was far more sophisticated and complicated, and there were various actors at play. It wasn't just the students. There was Jamaat-e-Islami, there was the army, there were so many other people now. I want to ask you that, for a very long time, people have been saying that India has been looking at Bangladesh through the lens of 1971. That, thousands of Indian soldiers and officers lost their lives and East Pakistan became Bangladesh. And somehow there is a feeling that, the Bangladeshis don't remember 1971. What is this about?
Well, I think, first of all, of course, 1971, the Liberation War, was, a huge, I would say, cataclysmic event. I mean, we had 10 million refugees coming from Bangladesh into India. India was looking after the refugees. The situation in Bangladesh was absolutely dire, and there was a genocide going on against the people of Bangladesh. And of course, India had to take action. There was then, as you know, from 3rd of December, the war with Pakistan. And I always think that, we call it the Indo-Pak War of 1971, but it really was the Liberation War which played the key role, because Bangladesh was formed in that. When I went to Bangladesh in 2003 as India's High Commissioner, as part of my briefings in Delhi, people told me exactly what you're saying, that, you're going there, good, but, Bangladesh has forgotten 1971. And you'll find this when you go there, they've all forgotten. And I was a bit surprised, but I said, all right. So I went to Bangladesh, and I'm always fond of traveling. So I used to go into the countryside, meet villagers, meet school children, meet school professors, and, meet people from all walks of life, inside Dhaka and outside, everywhere, whether it's Chittagong, whether it is, Gopalganj, everywhere. And, when I met those youngsters and people, and even Mukti Jodhas, they said to me, India has forgotten 1971. And I was absolutely amazed. How is it possible? India forgot 1971. And then I realized there's a complete lack of communication. There's a complete miscommunication between India and Bangladesh. Because if you recall, after Sheikh Mujib was assassinated in 1975, on 15th of August, as we know, the date was very carefully chosen. And after that, there was a military rule. And memories of the 1971 war were sought to be eradicated. The posturing, the reasoning, the whole understanding of 1970 war was changed. According to Bangladesh military students, according to Bangladesh regular students, in the history books, the role of India was just not there. So actually, it was only the old people, the people who were their Mukti Jodhas, their children, they knew how their parents described the war. They were the ones who remembered. And I thought we got to correct this. So the first thing I did when I went there was, when I heard this from them that India has forgotten 1971, I recall that, in Fort Williams in Calcutta, every year on 16th of December.
It's my Eastern Command headquarters.
Oh, yes, it is Eastern Command headquarters. That's right. They have a grand celebration of Vijay Divas. There's a very, very formal and wonderful celebration each year at the memorial. And I recall that. And I said, how can it be? But then I realized, and it was amazing for me to realize, that on 16th December, at Vijay Divas celebration in Fort William, there is nobody from Bangladesh. And similarly, in Bangladesh, on 16th December, in their celebration, there's nobody from India. So despite having fought this war together and shed blood together between India and Bangladesh, we had gone so far apart that even our celebrations were not common. So I worked very hard throughout that 2004 year, talking to Fort Williams, talking to Ministry of Defense, talking to Ministry of External Affairs, and requesting that can I send people from Bangladesh to participate in the Vijay Divas celebrations in Fort Williams. And after a great deal of effort, it was agreed, and I was told, yes, you select the people. So I selected a group of people, all were freedom fighters, but some of, after the war, somebody had become a doctor, somebody joined the army and stayed on, somebody went into academia, became professors and retired from academia, somebody became filmmakers. So there was a whole variety of people who went to Fort Williams to participate in the Vijay Divas celebrations. And they were very moved. When they came back from Fort Williams and they met me, they had tears in their eyes. They said, we know now that India has not forgotten 1971. So that was a very, very moving moment for me, that we had, brought together again. And after that, every year, people have been coming from Bangladesh to participate in Fort Williams celebrations. And then in 2007, I must tell you about 2007, it's a very interesting point. That in 2007, there was an army-backed caretaker government in Bangladesh. And 2005, in Bangladesh, we had for the first time in Bangladesh a chief of army staff, Muin Ahmed, who was Bangladesh trained. He was from first course of BMA. Bangladesh Military Academy. And I must say that I saw the difference because before him, the army chief had been a Pakistan trained.
All of them from PMA?
Yes, all the way of them from PMA, all Pakistan trained. And their attitude was different. Their thinking was different. And many of them were even reluctant to meet the Indian High Commissioner to talk about interaction between Bangladesh Army and Indian Army. And in fact, Bangladesh Chiefs of Army Staff had been very reluctant to visit India. But after General Moin Ahmed took over as Chief of Army Staff, immediately I called on him, and it was a very wonderful and warm call, and talk of cooperation started between the army, the Indian Army and the Bangladesh Army. Now, this is the army which took over in 2007, led by Moin Ahmed as the as the army-backed caretaker government, because even then there had been a difference of opinion about the caretaker government. And Begum Khalda Zia was the Prime Minister. She tinkered with the caretaker government, which had worked well up to then, but she tinkered with the system and changed the retirement age of judges, etc., so that a person she wanted could become. And the Awami League protested. There were protests all over the country, and the elections could not even be held as scheduled. And so there was an army-backed caretaker government. Now, during this caretaker government, they actually started the system of sending people, inviting people from India to Bangladesh for the celebrations. So, this was actually a bit of a breakthrough that we saw, that there was a great deal of positive thinking. So, actually, relations between the India and Bangladesh army had been growing since then. But Muhammed Yunus was there even at that time, and there was an effort at that time to make him the head of the caretaker government, and he wanted to start a political party of his own. And he even did, but it didn't work. It didn't succeed. There was no response from the people. So after 3 months, he gave up politics. He said, I'm leaving politics. I'm not forming a government, and so on. And so he went away from politics. Now, in 2024, I think one has to look at it from that point of view. This was a very carefully planned. The Jamaat-e-Islami's influence is very important. They have an influence within the army. It is that influence that got the army to say...
Jamaat-e-Islami has influence inside the Bangladesh army?
Oh, yes. Yes. That has been there. And the Islamization of the Bangladesh army took place because of this influence. There's been a strong Islamization of the Bangladesh army over the last year. Just as you've seen in Pakistan, so in Bangladesh, there's a strong Islamization. And it is this that has taken that has caused this coup to be planned. Certainly, you can know who is behind it and where the planning is taking place, where it has taken place. You can understand, this factor is something that is not... I link this up with the activities of Jamaat-e-Islami after 5th of August. After Sheikh Hasina left the country, the entire attacks in the countryside were by the Jamaat-e-Islami. They were not stopped by the army. Nobody stopped those attacks. And now some people, the New York Times is calling it revenge attacks. Nobody's seeking to go into it. And people are losing their lives, their businesses are being destroyed. And today, as of today, even the Hindus and minorities are being asked to step down from any post they may have. Whether at the local government level, in the UNOs, upazilas, whether it is in ministries. So they are being told to step down from their posts. They are being branded, and so they are in a very, very difficult and uncertain situation. The head of the interim government, Professor Muhammad Yunus, went to the Dhakeshwari temple. He met them and he reassured them. But the Hindu community is saying, look, please, just as you're having an inquiry into the killing of the students, please have an inquiry into the attacks on the Hindus and other religious minorities. Churches have been vandalized, some Sattal homes have been destroyed. So it's a very difficult situation. And in Dhaka, situation is back to normal, but outside Dhaka, it is very difficult because we don't know. The police had gone away completely. The police stations were ransacked. The weapons were now they're trying to get back some of the weapons. So the situation remains uncertain.
A few months before her ouster, Sheikh Hasina made a very important statement. She said a white man had come. I'm sure you heard about this. A white man came and said, I need this island, I need this base, and everything will go on perfectly. Now, I don't know whether it's a conspiracy theory or not. I don't know. So I'm taking Sheikh Hasina at her, at the face value. She said something. She's the Prime Minister at that point in time. She said it. But the very same thing Imran Khan had said a few years back in Pakistan, that somebody came and said that, I need military bases. And I said, absolutely not. And they said that if you want to last as the Prime Minister of Pakistan, then you jolly well toe our line. I want to ask you, ma'am, is this a conspiracy theory, or there was such a thing where people wanted something from Bangladesh and she said no?
Well, this is a statement made by Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. So I cannot go into saying that since I have not spoken to her about this. I cannot say whether it was true or not. But certainly I can say that, she has often spoken, and we know that the American government was very much against her. That is true because ever since her father passed away, was assassinated, the assassins of her father, 2 of them who've been convicted assassins, are living in USA. One is living in Canada and so on. So she's always been wanting to say, give them, extradite them and so on. And that has not happened. So this has always built a very edgy relationship between Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, ma'am. Why won't America extradite the killers of Bangabandhu? Why won't they do it?
Well, they just haven't. I mean, there's been no reasoning for that. And
they're just stalling.
Yes. There's no answer. There's no reasoning for that. And although even the war crime trials were held because of Sheikh Hasina. So, the whole memory of what happened in the Liberation War and who was it? How did it happen? Who were the Razakars? Who were the people who were supporting Pakistan in the genocidal attacks? All that has only come out when Sheikh Hasina held the war crime trials. And at that point, she was incredibly brave because a lot of countries were against it, including Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Turkey. But she went ahead. It is the memory of my father. He was assassinated for this, and I want to do this in the memory of my father to identify it. She also completed the trial for the killers of Sheikh Mujib. And this is what, some of them were sent to the gallows, some of them. In fact, one of them was in hiding in India, and he was sent back to Bangladesh. So they dispersed after that, the entire group. So this is something that Sheikh Hasina had very close to her heart. And this is her entire vision and her entire belief in what she stood for. So I always consider that Sheikh Hasina is a strong nationalist. She was looking always for the development of her country, for the interests of her people. Now, for people to say that India is pro-Sheikh Hasina or, anti-somebody else is not correct, because we are dealing with the Prime Minister who has been elected in Bangladesh.
Absolutely.
In 2009, the elections she won, they were the largest, and the world recognized they were free and fair, and she got the largest possible majority, 3/4, which she never expected herself to get that kind of majority. And she did. And so she started all this process of the last 15 years of development, of, finding out about the killers of her father, the events, the war crime trial. Now, 15 years is a very long period. There's always a huge anti-incumbency. There will be a lot of her decisions which would not have been welcome, would have been criticized, and so on. And so she had a lot of people, calling her autocratic, calling her she doesn't listen. Maybe, I'm sure with, this 15 years, you get isolated, you don't know, you don't have your fingers on the pulse of what's happening. That could have definitely happened because in so many years, this is absolutely inevitable. And I think that is why you see that the people are saying that this, but to say that this is entirely a student movement, there's nothing behind it, I think that needs to be looked at very carefully. And it's not that we are not recognizing, yes, she's left the government, there's a new government. The Indian government has very correctly said that we are going to deal with the new government. We've offered constructive engagement with the new government. We've offered that, we'll work with you. Our Prime Minister sent a very good message. He also drew a strong attention to the plight of the Hindus and other religious minorities. This has been greatly appreciated. And Professor Muhammed Yunus has replied, and he telephoned our Prime Minister and assured that all efforts would be made to make sure that the minorities are not being harmed. So this is going on. This is not that our government has done absolutely the right thing. This is the correct. Whoever is there in power, you deal with that person. There's a huge array of projects and enterprises and investments that have taken place over the last 15 years. And certainly we would like to carry that forward. All the connectivity projects, the power plants, the exchange exchange of electricity through the power grid, which is absolutely unique area. The Friendship Pipeline, which brings petroleum products from Numaligarh in India, in Assam, to the north of Bangladesh. Instead of having the same petroleum products go right from the port in Chittagong and come, by truck with all the pollution and expenditure and, all the difficulties. So all these projects are ongoing. We would like to continue that. We want to carry on the relationship with the Bangladesh people. Relationship is basically a people-to-people relationship. And of course, one must be aware what is going on. That is very important. But the relationship remains people-to-people, and it will always be so. So all these projects that were done with Bangladesh, the $8 billion credit line, in 2 or 3 tranches given to the people of Bangladesh for the projects, joint projects selected, whether in railways, whether building, community projects, high-impact community projects. All this is done for the benefit of the people. The benefit is going to the people. And I think they do realize that, So, that is why I think that to have, as has happened, a strong whispering anti-India campaign blaming India for Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, that also is something that we would not like to see. And that is something that has been happening, a very strong undercurrent of anti-Indianism. But certainly we are prepared to again talk to the people, discuss with them, be open with them, and emphasize at all times that the friendship is between the people and it's for the people.
Now, one thing I haven't been able to understand is, you're talking about the 8 billion credit line, you're talking about projects which the countries have done together. We have not had any, the border dispute was sorted out amicably. Give this land, take that land, end of story, sign off. All that was done. We've never fought a war with Bangladesh. In fact, the only war that we fought was fought together against Pakistan. But it is true to anybody who follows social media, even mainstream media, there is a very strong anti-India feeling in Bangladesh. I'm talking about the street, ma'am. Why is that?
I think, again, that this is the more the relationship between India and Bangladesh has been developing at various levels, the counter to that is this anti-Indian campaign, which is by the BNP and the Jamaat-e-Islami. And it's not that we're not in touch with them. When I was in Bangladesh as the High Commissioner, it was the BNP government led by Begum Khalida Zia, and Jamaat-e-Islami was part of that government. So I used to meet all the ministers, the Jamaat-e-Islami, the Amir of the Jamaat-e-Islami.
And they were absolutely fine.
Absolutely. I used to speak in Hindustani with all of them. They were absolutely friendly. I used to go for the iftar parties, and we had very good relations with them at the personal level. Of course, there were a lot of policy issues that were great, and the biggest policy issue was a security issue. And the fact that even at that time, the security issue was paramount for India. The presence of Northeast insurgent groups on Bangladesh soil. They would have camps, and they would move these camps from place to place. It was very difficult without the support of the government to actually identify where they are and who they are. Chittagong Arms Hall happened when I was there, where weaponry, huge amounts of weaponry, meant for the Ulfa, meant, perhaps for other Maoist groups in India, which came to Chittagong, and the hand of the government had been established. The government at the time in that group, in getting those arms, the hand of Ulfa, in receiving those weapons. All that was happening at that time. So security issues were a major issue. And I think that one of the biggest aspects which Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina was willing to look at carefully was the security, India's security concerns, India's security red lines. So she said that why should we have these insurgent groups on our soil? They don't help the people of Bangladesh. So her foreign policy was friendship with all, malice towards none. So we are going to end all these kind of security forces from other anti-Indian elements on our soil. And that's what she did. So our security concerns were met, and all the security red lines dissipated. When I was there, every terrorist incident in India for those 3 years had a Bangladeshi footprint, because the same terrorists were coming from Pakistan to Bangladesh, and from there entering India through this hugely porous border. And even going to Kashmir through coming from Bangladesh into India, and then going to Kashmir from there. After entering India, they could make their way anywhere. They would receive all these, papers and documentation and so on. So this was a huge security.
Ma'am, allow me to intervene, ma'am. So they come into India from Bangladesh, they receive these papers. So these papers means identity as an Indian national. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, or Aadhaar card and so on, whatever was the requirement.
And they take these Aadhaar cards.
They would take the card or a ration card or an Aadhaar card, get an identity, walk into India, and then use it for whatever they wanted to do.
And then go to Kashmir.
Yes, and many Bangladeshi illegal immigrants were also doing that. And we saw so many terrorist attacks at that time where this footprint would be there. It would not be these, if they were of Pakistani origin, if they were the Lashkar-e-Taiba or the Jaish Muhammed, many of them would go to Kashmir and participate in those terrorist activities there. There were others who were coming into India or who were already living in India, maybe Bangladeshi illegal immigrants who were being used for these kind of terrorist attacks in the country. In different parts of the country, not only in Jammu and Kashmir, but also in other parts of the country. So this was a huge security red line for us, and it was very difficult. In fact, I remember in my time they used to say that every aircraft that comes from Pakistan to Bangladesh has about 8 or 10 people who step in without any papers. Who are just allowed to come into the country, and then from there, where they go, what happens. Those were huge problems at that time. And we had constant discussions with Prime Minister Khalida Zia on the subject. But there was no, shall I say, resonance or no, dealing with those issues, which were immediately dealt with afterwards. When even during the army-backed caretaker government, there was an improvement in the situation. I told you that the first BMA chief, General Moin Ahmed, even under him, there was an improvement in the situation. And then later on, when Sheikh Hasina came in 2009, there was huge improvement in the situation and all the problems were solved. So to say that this is like pro-Sheikh Hasina, anti-Sheikh Hasina, that's not the issue. The issue is meeting India's security concerns. I say even to the interim government and elections, if they are going to be held, there's a lot of talk now that elections will not be held in a hurry because there's too much reform they're saying to be done. Yes. So all this is there, whether this government is going to stay on, and the students want to form their own political party. The students, I have to show you how amorphous the group is. Yesterday's papers had the report that some students groups from Chittagong, they have resigned, they have left the Students Against Discrimination movement because they say we're not being kept informed by what is happening. Because 2 of the student leaders are now in the interim government. One of them is now in charge of the IT ministry, and the other student groups are objecting to what they are doing. So, but at the same time, the people in Dhaka say they want to form a political party, and that's going to take time. So all this is it's a churn. It's a complete churn that is going on. One has to understand behind it what is there, and certainly one has to see what that means for India. For India, our security concerns are paramount. With Bangladesh, we have a 4,000-kilometer border. As you correctly said, we solved our land border with Bangladesh. We solved our maritime boundary with Bangladesh. In fact, the maritime boundary was a disputed boundary. And there were a lot of talks between India and Bangladesh that, how do we solve it? The talks didn't bring the results. And then the Bangladesh government decided to go for international arbitration on their own. And India was very apprehensive that what would be the result of the international arbitration could be accepted. By the time the international arbitration result came, Prime Minister Modi was Prime Minister in India. And he said, whatever the result, I will accept it. And when the result came, there was a lot of concern that would, the Indian government. But no, he said, yes, we will accept it. We will not ask for any review. And so the maritime boundary has been solved. All these issues, which had been ticklish issues for decades, the land boundary, it was implemented. The exchange of enclaves took place. So all these issues, which people now don't even remember because it happened some time back, meant a big difference to the lives of the Indians and the Bangladeshis on both sides. And the trade boomed. When I was there, Bangladesh exports to India were like $50 million. Annual exports. And I said, I must double this. I must make it 100 million. And of course, I worked very hard and we got it to be 100 million. Today, the exports are $2 billion from Bangladesh to India. And that's a huge atmosphere of prosperity for all those people doing it. India has given a completely we don't have a free trade agreement, but a completely open market. And there's no restrictions on Bangladeshi exports except for a very few items, alcohol and tobacco and some items like that. And these are taking place and of great benefit. India's exports to Bangladesh are much more. They're about 9 billion or a little more, 9.6. But these exports to Bangladesh very often are inputs into Bangladesh's own value-added chain of their exports, like ready-made garments, so textile machinery, man-made yarn, cotton yarn, a lot of inputs like that, pharmaceuticals material for their pharmaceutical sector. So it really goes into their own exports. And then, of course, you have agricultural products and many of the essential commodities that Bangladesh needs. So it's a very much a win-win situation that had been worked out. And we certainly hope that the win-win situation will continue. That is certainly a very forward-looking approach that our government has taken to deal with the government of the day and to talk to them in all sincerity and all honesty and see how we can move ahead.
Absolutely, ma'am. And this is going to be my last question. There have been feelers from Bangladesh, and a lot of people in positions of influence in Bangladesh are calling for the extradition of, Sheikh Hasina. They're saying she must face the War Crimes Tribunal, and they've set up some structure there, and they're saying that she's responsible for genocide, etc., etc. Now, 2 points here, ma'am. The first point, of course, is that what should India do in this regard? You can't send back a former head of state because that calls into question your credibility. Tomorrow, anybody who comes to India, India will hand over, that means. That is one. Number two is that why isn't Bangladesh, and it pains me as an Indian, in 2016, Mr. Kiran Rijiju, who was at that time Minister of State in the Home Department, or the Home Ministry rather, he said in Parliament that there are over 2 crore illegal Bangladeshis living in India. So nobody's asking for their extradition. But Sheikh Hasina, how does this play out is my final question to you, ma'am.
Well, yes, there have been every day new cases are being filed against Sheikh Hasina in Bangladesh. Murder charges are being put. I don't think, this term genocide is being used, but the murder charges. And of course, as I told you, one has to see if there's going to be a, broad independent assessment of what really happened, in Bangladesh, beginning 15th of July and ending on 5th of August. Let me tell you that these cases, a lot of cases, under Bangladesh, when Sheikh Hasina was Prime Minister, there were a lot. Chittagong Arms Hall was investigated, and a lot of cases of that kind were tried. Even under the army-backed caretaker government, there had been cases against Begum Khalida Zia and cases against her son Tariq Rahman, who, as you know, is the force behind the throne in the BNP. And he, despite the verdict against him, was allowed to go to UK, and he's been living there as a refugee for 15 years. And the UK government has said nothing about that. He's there, and there have been calls from the Bangladesh government to send him back and trial. And of course, there has been nothing from the UK government about that. And he's living there 15 years. And of course, a lot of talk about who's supporting him, etc., etc. But now, when Sheikh Hasina came to India, she was given the aircraft by the army chief and came to India. And she wanted to go to UK because her sister lives there. Her sister, Sheikh Rehana, has been living in UK all along. I think she must be a British national. They allow dual passports in Bangladesh. Sheikh Rehana's daughter, Tulip Siddiq, is actually a junior minister in the Labour government, in Keir Starmer's government. But now all kinds of questions are being brought up. That no, this is the rule. There's no such rule. It is just that they want to create the problem for Sheikh Hasina to go anywhere, to say that she has no place to hide, etc., etc. For us in India, I think Sheikh Hasina has been a good friend, and I think it depends first and foremost on what Sheikh Hasina would like to do. If she says that she would like to live in India for some time, I think there will be absolutely no problem from the Indian government side, and I think that she will be assured of a safe stay in India. We must remember that she's lived in India before, and when her father was assassinated, when Sheikh Mujib was assassinated, and the whole family was wiped out, even her youngest brother, very young children, her pregnant sister-in-law, all of them, they were killed. She and her sister Sheikh Rehana, they escaped because they were in Germany at the time. They were visiting Sheikh Hasina's husband, who's a scientist. He's passed away now. He was doing a project in Germany, and she escaped. But then she came back to India, and under Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, she was allowed to stay in India. She stayed here for many years, 5-6 years, till she went back to Bangladesh, and she was invited to take over the reins of the Awami League party, and then she went back and entered political life in Bangladesh. So I think that she is very confident of a safe stay, and I think the people of India would be very happy with that. So I don't see any kind of,
problem with that.
Yeah, I think just as... I think the judiciary there has to be, because they used to accuse, when the judiciary was appointed by Sheikh Hasina, they were accusing the judiciary of being pliant. And in fact, this judiciary, all the judges appointed by Sheikh Hasina were removed by the students grawing them. The students growed them last Sunday, I think, and they were forced to just resign. And now there's a new judiciary, and they're receiving all these cases. Well, let's see how it goes.
Thank you very much for talking to us, ma'am. And there are so many things that you shed light on, which this entire thing that the students of Bangladesh are a homogeneous lot and they think alike, and this is some sort of a pure freedom movement. That's not true. I think you've just punctured it majorly. And thank you for coming on our podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, I am with Miss Veena Sikri, former High Commission to Bangladesh. And she said that, you see, this is not as simple as it sounds. So there is an American interest, there is a Jamaat-e-Islami interest, there is a Bangladesh army interest, there are various factions of students which are not a homogeneous lot at all. There are various conflicting political ideologies. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. Ma'am, thank you very much for joining us. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll catch you again very soon with another special guest. Till then, take care and Jai Hind.